Hey everyone, Bella here, your favorite content creation specialist over at Self-Publishing School, and today we're going to be talking about how I, someone who didn't go to college and has zero formal training in writing, got a job as a writer for a company writing about writing and publishing, and I'm writing my first book. Hint, it might have something to do with learning how to become a better writer. Like I said, I didn't have any formal training when it came to writing. Everything I've learned about writing, I've learned on my own, and mostly it's from me just figuring out what works and what doesn't, and taking tips from those who have done it well and have done it the best and putting them to use in my own writing. And this landed me a fantastic job where I get to create content about writing and publishing for writers and publishers. And that's not to even mention the work I'm doing on my own book, which I'm really excited about. So how did I do this? How did somebody with no formal training in writing land a job as a writer? I'll give you a hint again. It has to do with learning how to improve your writing, something that all writers have the ability to do, because unlike many other talents out there, writing is something that you can never not improve on. Even the oldest, most experienced writers are continuously getting better the more they write. And the reason that I am able to be in the position I am today and to write and to even create content like this video for you guys is because I took the time, I researched, and I figured out what the heck actually works to improve your writing, and I'll give you all the details below, including some tips from famous authors who have writing that is considered some of the best in the world. I saved those for the end for you guys. Let's just get right into the video. So the first tip I have for you that works the best is to write what you want to read. It's really that simple. All you have to do is write something that you would read as a reader. The reason this works so well is that a lot of us get so caught up in our own heads about what other people are going to think of our writing. We obsess over the fact that we want other people to like it. And so we end up writing for somebody else. And then we're not passionate about it anymore. And it's taking on a form that isn't super great and we're not liking it that much. And guess what? When you don't like what you're writing, you won't write as much and you won't write it as well. That's why when you write what you want to read, you stay passionate, you stay motivated, you stay inspired because it's a book that you would pick up and read yourself. And guess what? There are a ton of people out there who would love the same books that you love. And that means when you're writing a book for yourself, you are also writing for everybody else who will love that book. Those are the people who will find your book, and those are the people who will become raving fans. Writing tip number 2 that really works is to write with intention and with purpose. What the heck does that mean? So when you're writing a book, you always want to have the purpose and the intention behind your work when you write. You always want to be writing with a goal in mind. What do you want to show your readers? What do you want them to take away from this scene? What do you want them to feel and take away from your book by the time they finish reading it? The reason an outline really helps you write with intention is because you know exactly what to say next. You know where your book is going. Therefore, you know what you need your readers to feel or take away from that chapter. This helps you write with intention and with a purpose, and your writing will always be stronger when you know exactly what you want to say. Writing tip number 3 is to write as much as you can. Write anything, write everything, write every single day, and that's not an exaggeration. Some of the best writers in the world will tell you the exact same thing. The more you write, the better you get. It's like a muscle, and I've explained this before in a previous video. It's like working out. So the more you work out, the easier the workouts are, the more you'll be able to push yourself, right? You're in shape to work out. It's the same for writing. If you're not in writing shape, it's gonna take you a little bit to get in that mindset. It's gonna take you a little bit to get in the shoes of your characters. Whereas if you're writing every single day, you're automatically gonna be put back in there. You stay in that mindset and your writing brain stays in shape. That's why you have to write every single day if you can. That's why here at Self-Publishing School, we always recommend that you get a schedule and you stick to it, because the more you write, the better you get and the stronger your writing becomes. Tip number 4 is to read as much as you can. So if you're a writer, chances are you probably are a reader as well. You love books, you love to read, and this is great. And you should always be reading something. The reason for this is because when you read, you learn how to write and you pick up new techniques and methods, even if you don't realize you are. And another part about reading is that it helps you appreciate the beauty of the craft. And there's something about understanding how eloquent and beautiful writing is that makes you motivated and inspired to get back to your own book. There's a famous quote out there somewhere by Stephen King saying something along the lines of, if you don't have the time to read, you don't have the tools or abilities to write. Paraphrasing, but that's the quote. And it's so true, because all of us learned how to write by reading. Think about that. The next tip, number 6, is to use strong language. This is a very specific tip for your writing craft. When you write, you want to use strong language that invokes emotion and very clear pictures. We tend to call this strong verbs. These are often what you can use in order to make your writing stronger if you're not sure where to start with that. We actually have a list of over 200, over 300 strong verbs for you to download. You can check that out, click the link in our bio, and you can have those for free. It's a list of strong verbs that actually has the weak verbs they replace and a bunch of different versions for you. Take that, go through your manuscript, replace the weak verbs, and it'll be that much stronger. The next writing tip I have for you is to show, don't tell, which I'm sure you've heard at least 50,000 times before, because it's one of the most talked about writing tips out there, and it's for a good reason. If you're not sure what showing versus telling is in writing, we have a video that details it in full for you to check out. But the basis of this idea is to use more visuals when describing something that's happening instead of just telling the reader what happened. So for example, you could say they were best friends, or you could show a scene of your character interacting with their best friend and being happy, hugging them, talking like they're best friends. That's how you show somebody what you want them to feel or want them to know instead of just saying it. This creates a better experience for your readers, and it helps them visualize your world and your book more. The next tip is to get feedback often. This is really hard. I personally struggled with this a lot. I didn't want to send my writing to anybody. It's still hard. I think every single writer struggles with sending the writing to somebody else because it's such a vulnerable process. But the thing is, feedback is what makes you a better writer. Why? Because you can't always see your flaws. You are not able to separate yourself from your work that much in order to see the mistakes that you've made. And we all make mistakes. That's just how writing goes. But when you get feedback, they're able to pinpoint patterns and flaws that you make and you continuously do, that you can pinpoint, focus on, and get better, so you no longer make those mistakes anymore. I know for me, one of my critique partners pointed out that I did a lot of emotional explaining in my work, and I went back through all my previous writing and I'm like, wow, she's right. So it only takes one person pointing out one thing for your writing to completely transform. The next tip we have is to study psychology. I know, I'm not necessarily giving you homework, but it wouldn't hurt. And the reason for this is because when you understand how the human mind works, you can, 1, create better characters that are more realistic, and 2, you can mess with your readers' minds. That's probably my favorite part. When you understand what readers take away from different situations and how they process things emotionally, you can use that to your advantage when you're telling a story, as well as when you're crafting your characters. The better your characters, the more realistic the story is going to feel, and that's really going to be a benefit to you. The next tip we have is one of my favorites, and it's because it's all about how you see the world. And the tip is to rephrase common visuals. And I'll give you an example of this and how it works and why it's important. Because after all, your job as a writer is to make other people see the world a little bit differently. And this is my favorite part because you're putting a little bit of yourself into these visuals. You could say the sun set behind the trees and the world fell quiet. However, you can also say something that's a little bit more interesting and worded better and has more literary devices that gives it a more of an experience for the reader to read. Something like this: night yanked the horizon over the sun, silencing the world with its absence. So that says the exact same thing, but it says so in a more interesting way that other readers probably haven't read before. And that's your goal as a writer, is to allow your readers to appreciate the world in different forms. Those are all of our general tips, and we have some awesome tips from really famous, really successful, amazingly talented authors. My personal favorite I save for the absolute last, but we'll go ahead and start right now with one from Margaret Atwood. Margaret's tip is to just do it. And no, it's not the Shia LaBeouf version, but it's quite similar. Margaret Atwood says that, I think the main thing is just do it. Plunge in. Being Canadian, I go swimming in an icy, cold lakes, and there's always that dithering moment. Am I really going to do this? Won't it hurt? And at some point, you just have to flop in there and scream. Once you're in, keep going. You have to crumble and toss, but we will do all that. Courage, I think that is what's most required. And that's so true. Sometimes all you really need to do in order to start writing is just dive in and get it done. Next tip we have is from somebody who famously had to work for it, and that is exactly her advice. J.K. Rowling says, you really have to work for it. To quote her, she explains, you've got to work. It's about structure. It's about discipline. It's all these deadly things that your school teacher told you you needed. You need it. That is something that some writers and authors might not think as much about. They think, oh, I can just write the book and publish it and that's going to be it. But there's work involved. There's work on your craft, on the story structure, on everything from your theme to your message. It is work and you have to work for it. The third tip from a famous author, maybe you've heard of him, Stephen King, not like I mentioned him in this video already. His advice is that you first have to write for yourself. Essentially, his idea is that you have to first tell yourself the story before you can take a step back and write it to tell everybody else. And this is mostly along the lines of write the first draft for yourself. You don't have to show anybody if you don't want to. The feedback part comes once you have a draft or two done. But the story, you have to first tell yourself the story in order for you to understand what the story is actually going to be. Because your outline, that's just a brief look at your story. Whereas the actual first draft, that's when you figure out what works, what doesn't work, what do you want to keep in your draft. And that's you writing for you. The number 4 tip comes from Ray Bradbury, and he says, quantity will make up for quality. And in this case, he means that the more you write, the better you get. And he says, Michelangelo's Da Vinci, Tintorino's billion sketches, and the quantitative prepared them for qualitative. Single sketches further down the line, single portraits, single landscapes of incredible control and beauty. Basically, he's saying practice. The more you practice, the better you're gonna get. Number 5 piece of advice is from Maya Angelou, a really talented poet, and she says, tell the truth. That is her piece of advice in order to write better, and this is why. She says, I don't know about lying for novelists. I look at some of the great novelists and I think the reason they are great is that they're telling the truth. The fact is they're using made-up names, made-up people, made-up places, and made-up times, but they're telling the truth about the human being, what we're capable of, what makes us lose, laugh, weep, fall down, and gnash our teeth and wring our hands and kill each other and love each other. So when you're writing, that goes back to your purpose and your intent. Why? Why are you writing? What truth do you have to tell? When you always have this in your mind, it's going to become clear in your writing as well. And tip number 6, my favorite by Jodi Picoult, is that you cannot edit a blank page. This has meant the world for me, and that's because you have to write first. Everybody's so focused on making their draft perfect. I am too. It's a perfectionist thing. I understand it. But the fact of the matter is you can't edit a blank page. That's it. You have to write before you can make it better, before it can become the version that you really want it to be. And that can really help you just sit down and write without caring so much that it's absolutely perfect, because the perfecting comes later when you edit. And that's all I've got for our favorite writing tips, as well as the writing tips from some famous authors. I hope you're feeling motivated and inspired, especially to click that subscribe and that like button. Make sure to follow us on social media as well so you can get daily tips and updates across all different forms of social media. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.
What I've been doing hasn't been working. I've been reading, I've been talking to local people, and here I am. I've written my manuscript. I'm on the verge of trying to find my illustrator, and I'm working and learning from people who've made it happen. The systems that I've learned and the perspective